So I was talking with a guy about this idea a few months ago, and he told me a story that was just jaw-dropping. I'll try to tell this story honestly and accurately. He has a good relationship with his father-in-law, friendly, mutual respect, a certain level of love and trust. You could define this relationship as a solid, loving relationship, but as with all of in-law relationships, there's a distance there. My friend said he always viewed his father-in-law as a very pragmatic guy, meaning he wasn't overly emotional. He's a farmer, so he raises livestock. So if a cow lives and then it dies, you move on. The life cycle is what it is. He just approached life with a very matter-of-fact attitude, and he didn't get worried about stuff. So he just kept working hard, and he never showed much emotion at all, which wasn't bad at all. My friend wasn't put off by that at all, but that's how he saw his father-in-law. And even on the day his father-in-law had to bury his own dad, he stayed unemotional, pragmatic, grounded through all of it. Until after the funeral. One interaction changed everything with his father-in-law. It changed the way he saw him, it changed the way they interact to this very day, and it created something very unexpected, which I'll tell you about a bit later. But it's all centered around one of the keys to deep relationships that we'll get into later. But let me catch you up. We're in a series called 3 Things Nobody Told You About Relationships. We spend plenty of money on relationships, and that's not necessarily the wrong thing to do. We buy gifts, book vacations, or weekend getaways, and we go to experiences to create memories together. And all of that can be really good, but we also know those things can backfire on us. While we're wanting to go deeper in our relationships with people by making these huge gestures, oftentimes we're finding that's not always the best way. In fact, sometimes we create more stress, more distance, more uncertainty with the very things that we thought were going to fix it. So last week, we talked about how generosity is the first key to deeper connection. Isn't generosity just spending a lot of money on the other people in our lives? Well, yeah, it can be, but that's not all of it. Generosity in terms of what Jesus taught us said this in John 15:12 and 13. My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. He was trying to show us that deeper connections come from our willingness to give generously of our time, our energy, and yes, maybe sometimes through gifts and experiences, but for sure in the way that we direct our daily focus. Our generosity shows up in all kinds of ways because we're working for the good of the other person, even if we don't get a fair trade out of it. But that's the way Jesus generously gave his life away over and over again in the New Testament. We are to love in the generous way because that's the way Jesus loves us. But Jesus wasn't just generous toward us. Jesus also modeled another key to deeper connection. The same discovery my friend made in an interaction with his father-in-law. Let me show you a story from Jesus' life that you may have heard about, but maybe today I'm going to give you maybe a new lens to see something that you can take and use to deepen your relationships. So Jesus has been out performing miracles, and he's been teaching some things that the religious leaders of his day saw as blasphemous. Things around him are really starting to get quite heated. There are death threats. He's been called demon-possessed, and people thought that he was out to cause a lot of trouble. Jesus had narrowly just escaped being stoned not too long ago, and as Jesus sort of retreats from Jerusalem in the midst of all this controversy and conflict, we get this story in John chapter 11. It says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Let's stop right there. I love this. Jesus had friends. Not just the disciples who he felt connected to, felt close to, enough to be described in this way. Like this family was a group of people he could call friends, like a safe haven from all the critics. But the problem was that Martha, Mary, and Lazarus lived really close to Jerusalem, where Jesus' most dangerous critics were hanging out. So it continues on. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. So Jesus finishes up what he's doing, and he tells his disciples, we got to go to Bethany. And the disciples are like, well, that's really close to Jerusalem, right? And he says, yeah, but I need to go. There's something I got to go do there. And we all know, as we know from reading the story, he's going to go do this amazing miracle of bringing Lazarus out of the tomb. He's going to raise him from the dead. So if you didn't know the story, I'm sorry. I just ruined it for you. Go read it for yourself. We're not going to get to that part. But as amazing as that is, it's not what we want to spend time looking at today. I want to notice the way that Jesus interacts with us and his friends in this moment. So we can learn from him how to be vulnerable in a way that deepens connections. That's the second habit to create deeper connections. Vulnerable seems like a scary word, doesn't it? Vulnerable is quite simple. It just means you're willing to take a risk. You put yourself in a situation that opens you up to risk. So watch how Jesus does that in this situation. When he arrives, he finds out Lazarus died and was buried 4 days ago. And the sisters, Mary and Martha, they are full of grief, as they should be. Those good friends of Jesus, they're hurting. And John writes this about what happens. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. But Mary stayed at home. We don't get any explanation for why Mary stays at home. Maybe she's too grieved. Maybe she's not feeling like greeting a friend because it's just too painful to see Jesus. But Martha comes out and says this to him. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. Jesus sure does risk a lot in this moment. I mean, he's facing his grieving friend, someone he loves. He risks looking weak. He risks looking powerless. He risks being ridiculed by his critics. They've all seen him do miraculous things, but look, here he is. And for his best friends, he couldn't even make it back in time to heal the guy. And Martha answers Jesus and says to him again, I know that Lazarus will rise again on the resurrection at the last day. And you can hear Martha trying to be kind to her friend. And so she says to Jesus that, hey, I know how powerful you are. And Jesus says, hey, listen, you really don't know the half of it. I know you're saying those words to comfort yourself and me in this moment. You're saying what we all say at funerals to comfort each other. I mean, we're going to see him again in heaven someday, right? There will be a day when we're all reunited in the end. And Jesus says, actually, I got something better than that. Because remember, spoiler alert, Jesus is about to bring Lazarus back. So Jesus knows he has the power to do what Martha could only dream about. And so Martha runs back home to get her sister Mary and bring her out to see Jesus. And Mary goes out, and a whole group of friends that had been there comforting her and crying with her and supporting her, they all go out there with her. And what do you think Mary says when she sees Jesus? Here's what she says. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now look, I know Jesus knows what the plan is here. He knows he's going to raise him from the dead. But now this second sister has said the exact same thing to him. And that's got to hurt. I mean, just a little bit. We trusted you, Jesus. I mean, don't you love us? What took you so long to get here? We've lost Lazarus. You showed up too late. And I'm not trying to blame you for my pain here, but you are the Son of God. And I'm trying to show that I trust you, but I'm also hurting. And I don't know what to say, but I know this. If you had just been here, Jesus. But Jesus was willing to show up in the middle of all of that pain. And he didn't make excuses. Hey, guys, I'm really busy. I couldn't get here any earlier. Yeah, there's lots of sick people and lost people, and I've got places to go and people to see. He doesn't defend himself at all in this moment. What I find fascinating about this entire interaction is that Jesus was willing to just show up in the middle of the pain. I think sometimes we all avoid the pain of someone else, not because we don't love them, but we don't have any real answers. And we look at this and think, well, Jesus is going to raise him from the dead, so this is really no big deal, right? I think this is a huge deal. Jesus showed up. He didn't chastise them for grieving. He didn't tell them to stop crying. He didn't try to preach to them. He just allowed himself to sit with them in their pain for a little bit. He was willing to sit in the discomfort with them. Here, let me show you how I know that. Because before he calls Lazarus out of the tomb, he does this. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Let me ask you something. Have you ever avoided an uncomfortable situation because you weren't sure what to say or what to do? So rather than send the text or check on someone, and rather than ask them to go to coffee, or rather than take them out for a meal, or rather than ask, hey, how are you doing really? You just didn't. And then you missed an opportunity to create a deeper connection. Jesus was moved and troubled by the grief of his friends, and he wasn't scared to go there. And then Jesus does something most of us never do. Jesus wept. Right there in front of everyone. Right where everyone could see. He didn't tough it out. Remember, Lazarus was his friend, and Jesus was willing to risk his emotions with these trusted people, and he let it all go. But his vulnerability in this moment, as we look back on it, we all see what? We see depth. This was a powerful moment that Jesus allowed us to see, And think about how much we learn just in this one simple, vulnerable moment. The depth of his love for his family is evident, his friends. The reality of the way Jesus felt true grief when death claims someone. Think about it in that moment. Did Mary and Martha feel closer or farther away from Jesus? They had just both confronted him. Why didn't you come here earlier? You could have prevented all this. So you think Jesus' presence in that moment deepened their connection or weakened it? Well, we all know the answer. But let me finish my friend's story about his father-in-law. See, after the funeral for this father-in-law's dad, my friend is saying goodbye to his father-in-law. And he's the only one standing there. My friend's wife and kids are in the car in the driveway watching all this happen from several feet away. And my friend says something simple to his father-in-law. Hey, I'm here for you. And his father-in-law breaks down crying. And they embrace right there in the garage. No words are spoken that are profound or powerful or memorable. But in that moment, my friend and his father-in-law had a moment that deepened everything. One person was willing to step into the pain, unsure of what to do or say or how to help. And the other was willing to be honest about what was going on inside. See, we often miss the opportunity to connect more deeply in favor of appearing strong. We'd rather look like we're in control than risk exposing our pain to someone else. But it is our vulnerability that allows us to create stronger bonds with those people we love. When is the last time you had an intentional conversation with someone that was uncomfortable? Like you addressed something that was hard for you to express, or you sat and listened to someone who was hurting, or maybe you apologized for something that you did or said, or maybe you took the time out of a busy week to put away your phone and just listen over lunch. The key word is intentionally, because we all gravitate toward comfortable. Because that is a key to experience the depth of relationships you want to have. Some of you are avoiding vulnerability when the people around you start to show signs of stress and you just keep getting resentful about the way they're treating you. And we do this a lot, don't we? I mean, why is she acting that way? Why does he keep doing that? That's not fair. And then we all start to get defensive and create distance from the healthy, loving relationships that we want to be closest and deepest. And rather than create a vulnerable moment, where you lay down all your expectations and have a conversation about what's going on in their life, we just keep letting resentment and pride and distrust build up. How many times have you had something eating away at you at work, and when you got home, you let loose on the people you care about the most? Not because they're doing such bad things at home, but because you felt so awful and insecure and angry about what happened earlier. And rather than being vulnerable and talking to someone about how bad you think you're doing at work, and going back to apologize and own your own stuff, you just let your anger blow up. Listen, have an honest conversation this week with God, maybe with a friend, with your spouse, with your kids. Not a blaming conversation or a guilt trip conversation. This is a here's where I am right now conversation. You don't get to use the word you in this conversation, or she's always, or if it weren't for that guy. None of those fingers get to point anywhere but at yourself. This conversation should go like this. For someone who is hurting, you just simply ask them, how's it going? How are you feeling? And how can I help? And for something you're struggling with, simply say this, hey man, there's just something I need to talk about with you. What opportunities to be vulnerable are you avoiding or missing or not taking advantage of? Where could you just be honest and vulnerable about where you are, about your finances with your spouse, about your feeling alone with a friend, about your anger that pops up when the kids are being rambunctious at bedtime? Are you making excuses for how you're responding and reacting to people close to you, but avoiding an honest conversation with God about what's really going on? The level of connection you want with the people closest to you requires vulnerability. Without it, you'll only get so close, and it won't be close enough for you or for them. This is the coolest thing about relationships that God wired into us. By sharing with others what's really going on inside us, we find the grace, love, and acceptance we need that will heal us.